The story follows Angela Harris, a black woman visiting her son Chris's upscale restaurant, where she becomes the target of deliberate poor service and veiled racist comments from a waitress. Angela's attempts to address the mistreatment escalate as Emily's hostility becomes blatant, exposing deep-seated biases. When Chris intervenes, the situation highlights the challenges of confronting systemic prejudice and ensuring accountability within the workplace. The narrative delves into the infuriating reality of microaggressions, racial bias, and the complexities of addressing discrimination, leaving the audience to grapple with the unsettling truths revealed through Angela's experience. Here is the story, a night at the heart of hard work. Naomi Davis stepped into the Artisan Table, the fine dining restaurant her son Caleb had painstakingly built from scratch. The soft glow of chandeliers reflected off the polished wood floors, and the subdued murmur of conversations blended with the clinking of glassware, creating an atmosphere of understated elegance. Naomi smiled, her heart swelling with pride. This was Caleb's dream come to life, a testament to his unwavering determination and countless sleepless nights. Tonight, she was here to celebrate her own personal milestone and the remarkable success of her son. Caleb had insisted Naomi visit the restaurant for dinner, promising to join her later for dessert after checking in on the staff. Ever humble, he rarely mentioned to guests that he was the owner, preferring instead to quietly ensure the seamless operation of his establishment. It was one of the many qualities she admired about him. As she approached the host stand, a young woman greeted her with a bright smile. "Good evening, ma'am, table for one?" "Yes," Naomi replied warmly, "but my son will be joining me later." "Right this way," the hostess said, leading her to a table by the window with a breathtaking view of the city lights. Naomi settled into her seat, smoothing the hem of her elegant emerald dress, and took a moment to savor the ambiance. Moments later, a waitress approached. She looked to be in her mid-30s, with a stiff posture and a sharp expression that lacked the warmth exhibited by the other staff. Without meeting Naomi's eyes, she said curtly, "Water?" "Yes, please," Naomi replied with a polite smile. The waitress returned with a glass, placing it on the table with a clunk. There was no greeting, no pleasantries, just an abrupt, "Ready to order?" Caught off guard, Naomi hesitated but maintained her composure. "I'll have the garden salad to start, followed by the seared halibut." The waitress scribbled the order on her notepad and walked away without another word. Naomi watched her move toward another table, where her demeanor shifted entirely. She greeted the diners with a bright smile, chatting animatedly as though they were old friends. The contrast was striking, but Naomi brushed it aside, reminding herself of why she was here, to celebrate. The wait grows longer. Time ticked by. Naomi glanced at her watch, noting it had been over 20 minutes since her salad plate was cleared, yet there was still no sign of her entree. Across the room, servers bustled efficiently, delivering dishes to tables and exchanging pleasant banter with guests. At a nearby table, a couple who had arrived after her were already enjoying their main courses, served with flair and enthusiasm by a cheerful waiter. Naomi's stomach tightened. She scanned the room for her waitress, spotting her leaning against the bar, laughing at something a diner had said. Frustration flickered in Naomi's chest. She raised her hand to catch the waitress's attention. The woman sighed audibly and rolled her eyes before making her way over, her forced smile thin and perfunctory. "What now?" the waitress asked, crossing her arms. Naomi kept her tone measured. "I've been waiting quite some time for my entree. Could you check on it, please?" "The kitchen's busy," the waitress replied with a shrug. "It'll come out when it's ready." Naomi's brows furrowed. "I understand the kitchen is busy, but I've noticed other tables have been served ahead of me. Could you check with the chef?" The waitress smirked. "Maybe they ordered something simple. Halibut takes time, you know." Naomi tilted her head slightly, her voice calm but firm. "I doubt halibut takes over half an hour. Please follow up on my order." The waitress let out an exaggerated sigh. "Fine, I'll check." She spun on her heel and walked away, her disinterest palpable. Naomi exhaled slowly, reminding herself not to let the interaction ruin her evening. She glanced around the restaurant, observing the stark difference in service provided to other tables. It wasn't just poor service, it felt deliberate, and that realization stung more than she cared to admit. Disrespect, revealed. Another 15 minutes passed before the waitress returned, still empty-handed. Her tone was laced with irritation. "Your food's not ready yet," she said flatly. Naomi's patience, already thin, began to fray. "Why is it taking so long?" she asked, her voice steady. "I've seen tables that ordered after me receive their meals." The waitress's smirk widened. "Maybe they don't complain about every little thing." Naomi felt a flicker of anger rise but kept her composure. Expecting basic service isn't complaining. It's part of dining here, isn't it? The waitress leaned in slightly, her voice dropping. You people always think the world owes you something. Naomi froze, her breath catching. The room seemed to still as the weight of the waitress's words sank in. Excuse me, she said, her voice low but firm. You heard me? The waitress replied, her tone almost taunting. Some of us actually work hard, others just expect handouts. For a moment, Naomi's mind raced. The blatant disrespect, the sharp contrast in service, it all added up. Heat rose to her cheeks, but she refused to let the waitress see her flinch. Instead, she straightened in her chair, her voice calm but cutting. I think you've made yourself clear. I'll take this up with someone who cares. The waitress faltered briefly but recovered with a scoff. Good luck with that, she muttered before storming off. Naomi sat back, her fingers gripping the edge of the table as she took a steadying breath. This wasn't just about poor service anymore. It was personal, targeted, and undeniably wrong. A turning point. From across the room, Naomi noticed Caleb emerging from the kitchen. His sharp eyes scanned the dining area, and for a moment, they locked onto hers. She didn't wave him over, unwilling to let this ruin his evening, but she hoped he'd notice the growing tension at her table. As the minutes dragged on, Naomi resolved to speak her mind, not just for herself, but for every diner who had ever been treated as less than. Little did the waitress know, the owner of the restaurant was closer than she thought, and the night's events were about to take an unexpected turn. A line crossed, Naomi sat stiffly in her chair, her patience worn thin by the constant barrage of disrespect. She met the waitress's gaze, her tone calm but unyielding. I came here to enjoy a meal, not to be judged by someone who seems to have forgotten the basics of her job. The waitress, who Naomi now knew as Claire, gave a scoff, her smirk almost daring. Right, because it's my fault you're unhappy with everything. Naomi inhaled deeply, refusing to let Claire's attitude rattle her further. I'd like to speak to the manager, she said, her tone steady. Claire let out a bitter laugh, her voice loud enough to draw a few glances from nearby tables. Of course you would. Let me guess. You're going to make this into a whole ordeal. I've seen it before. People like you always run for backup when things don't go your way. Naomi's jaw tightened at the loaded phrase. She leaned forward slightly, her voice firm but controlled. And what exactly do you mean by people like me? Claire tilted her head, her smirk widening as if daring Naomi to challenge her. You know what I mean? Always complaining, always playing the victim. If you don't like it here, maybe you should go somewhere. More your speed. The insult landed with a thud, the insinuation clear. Naomi gripped the napkin in her lap tightly, her knuckles white. More my speed? She repeated, her voice low but sharp. Is this how you treat all your customers, or just the ones you don't think deserve to be here? Claire shrugged dismissively. I treat everyone the same. Maybe you're just too sensitive. Naomi leaned back slightly, her composure intact despite the fire burning in her chest. Let me be very clear, she said, her voice icy and deliberate. Your behavior tonight has been unprofessional, disrespectful, and blatantly prejudiced, and it won't go unnoticed. Claire rolled her eyes, muttering under her breath. Oh, give me a break. You're just blowing this out of proportion because you're looking for something to be mad about. Naomi straightened in her seat, her tone rising just enough to command attention. I have been nothing but patient and polite. You, on the other hand, have gone out of your way to delay my order, insult me, and treat me like I don't belong. If you think I'm going to sit quietly and accept that, you're mistaken. The room grew quieter as nearby diners tuned into the escalating exchange. Claire's confidence wavered briefly, but she quickly recovered, doubling down. Oh, sure, she said with a mocking laugh. Make me the bad guy. That's what you people do best, right? Blame everyone else for your problems. Naomi's breath caught, the blatant insult striking like a slap. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a sharp voice cut through the air behind Claire. What's going on here? The owner steps in. Naomi turned her head and felt a wave of relief as she saw Caleb standing a few feet away. His sharp gaze was locked on Claire, his expression unreadable but carrying a quiet intensity. His presence immediately shifted the energy in the room, drawing every eye. Claire spun around, her smirk vanishing as her face paled. Nothing, she stammered. Just a little misunderstanding. Caleb's eyes flicked to Naomi, who gave him a calm but pointed look. His jaw tightened as he turned back to Claire. I'd like to hear it from the customer, he said, his tone firm and steady. Naomi straightened slightly in her chair, her voice measured as she spoke. It seems my order was forgotten, she said evenly. And instead of apologizing, she spent the last hour insulting me and making it clear she doesn't believe I belong here. Caleb's jaw clenched, his gaze hardening as he turned back to Claire. "We're handling this in my office," he said curtly, gesturing for Claire to follow. Claire hesitated, her posture stiff and defensive, but Caleb's tone left no room for argument. Naomi rose gracefully, following them to the back of the restaurant. Accountability in the office. Inside the small, neatly kept office, Caleb leaned against his desk, arms crossed as he fixed Claire with an unyielding stare. "Let's hear it," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "What happened out there?" Claire crossed her arms, her eyes darting nervously between Caleb and Naomi. "Look, it was just a misunderstanding," she said quickly, her tone defensive. "She got upset because her food was late and things got heated. That's all." Naomi tilted her head, her voice sharp but controlled. "Heated?" she repeated. "I asked a simple question about my order. That's not heated. That's basic accountability." Claire rolled her eyes, a thin smile playing on her lips. "See what I mean? Impossible to please, I forgot to put the order in. Big deal. But instead of being reasonable, she made it a whole scene." Caleb's voice cut through her excuses like a knife. "Making a scene? You mean asking for the service she was entitled to?" Claire straightened, her cheeks reddening. "I said it was a mistake. People forget things. It's not like I did it on purpose." Naomi's calm tone sliced through Claire's protest. "But you didn't stop at forgetting my order, did you? You mocked me. You made comments about people like me. If it was just a mistake, why did you feel the need to make it personal?" Claire flushed, her bravado cracking. "I didn't mean it like that," she said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "It just came out." She kept pushing and I... "Pushing?" Naomi interrupted, her gaze steady. "Asking about my order is pushing. Or was it my presence here that bothered you?" Caleb's voice dropped, cold and sharp. "Explain exactly what you meant by people like her." Claire hesitated, her composure crumbling under the weight of his stare. "I don't know," she mumbled. "It wasn't about her specifically, I just said something stupid." Naomi arched an eyebrow. "Not about me specifically. Then why did you question whether I belonged here?" Claire glared at Naomi, her frustration spilling over. "You're twisting my words." Caleb straightened, his voice like steel. "No one's twisting anything. I heard you out there. You didn't just forget her order, you treated her like she didn't matter, and you tried to justify it with comments that have no place in this restaurant or anywhere else." Claire's fists clenched, her voice rising. "Oh, come on, I've worked here for years. I've dealt with difficult customers every day. And now I'm the villain because I didn't cater to her every whim?" Naomi rose from her chair, her voice steady and commanding. "I didn't come here to make trouble. I came to celebrate my son's success. What I didn't expect was to be treated with open disrespect." Claire's face paled as the weight of Naomi's words sank in. "Wait, your son?" Caleb nodded, his expression icy. "Yes, my mother." Claire's mouth opened, then closed again as realization dawned. "I didn't know." "It shouldn't matter," Caleb interrupted sharply. "Whether she's my mother, a regular customer, or a stranger walking in for the first time, everyone deserves respect. And you made it painfully clear you don't care about that." Claire stammered, her defenses crumbling. I wasn't thinking. I just..." Naomi held up a hand, silencing her. "The issue isn't whether you were thinking. The issue is that you assumed you could treat me however you wanted without consequences." Caleb stepped forward, his tone firm. "Enough. Take a break. We'll finish this conversation later." Claire huffed, her face red with anger, but she stormed out without another word, slamming the door behind her. Caleb let out a long breath, turning to Naomi. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice heavy with frustration. "She was way out of line, and I'll make sure this is dealt with." Naomi gave him a small, encouraging smile. "I trust you will," she said. "But remember, this isn't just about me. It's about the kind of culture you want to build here." Caleb nodded, his expression resolute. "That culture doesn't include people like her." Setting the tone. Angela studied her son's face as he leaned against the desk, his brow furrowed in thought. "I think letting her go is the right decision," she said softly. "But will she leave understanding why it came to this?" Chris exhaled sharply, crossing his arms. "That's what I'm struggling with. If I fire her on the spot, she's just going to walk out of here thinking I overreacted because you're my mother. She'll blame me, blame you, and play the victim." Angela tilted her head thoughtfully. "So what's the alternative?" Chris straightened, his expression hardening with determination. "She needs to face the reality of what she's done. Not just to you, but to the culture I'm building here. She needs to hear from me, and maybe even the team, why her behavior is unacceptable. If she leaves, it'll be with a full understanding of the damage she caused. A small smile tugged at Angela's lips. You want to teach her a lesson? Exactly. Chris nodded. I'm going to call a staff meeting after the dinner rush. We'll address this together. Everyone deserves to know that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated. Angela raised an eyebrow. That could get messy. Are you prepared for how the team might react? Chris met her gaze firmly. If anyone has a problem with me standing up for these values, they don't belong here. I'd rather lose a few employees than let this place turn toxic. Angela leaned back, her approval evident. It's a bold move, but if anyone can handle it, it's you. Chris let out a humorless chuckle. You've always said I was stubborn. Guess it's finally working in my favor. Her smile faded slightly, her tone growing serious. Just make sure your message is clear. This isn't about firing someone. It's about showing your team what this restaurant stands for. That's exactly what I intend to do, Chris replied. This isn't about you being my mom. It's about ensuring that every customer and employee feels respected here. Angela leaned forward, her gaze steady. And what about her? Do you think she'll understand the impact of her actions? Chris's jaw tightened. I'm not sure, but she needs to hear it anyway. She doesn't get to leave thinking this is some personal vendetta. She'll know her words and actions hurt people. Angela nodded slowly. Then make her see it. Be clear about what she did and how it affects the values you're trying to uphold. Chris's expression softened as he looked at his mother. You've taught me so much about standing up for what's right, I just hope I can live up to it. Angela placed a hand on his arm, her voice warm. You already have. And this is another step toward building something you can be proud of. Chris smiled faintly, a spark of determination lighting his eyes. I'll make it happen. She'll have to face the truth before she leaves. Angela stood, smoothing the front of her dress. Good. And while you're at it, remind everyone why this place is different. Show them that respect and accountability aren't optional here. Chris nodded firmly. I will. Once the dinner rush ends, I'll call the meeting. She'll have to answer for what she's done. And then she's out. Angela gave him a proud smile. That's how you lead. With clarity and integrity. The staff meeting. As the dinner rush wound down, the restaurant grew quieter. Chris stood at the front of the dining room. His staff gathered before him in a semicircle. Angela sat off to the side, observing with quiet composure. The air buzzed with tension and curiosity. Claire stood among the group, her posture defensive, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her eyes darted nervously as she braced for what was coming. Chris cleared his throat, commanding the room's attention. Thank you all for staying late tonight, he began, his tone calm but firm. I need to address something that happened during service. It's something that goes against everything this restaurant represents. The staff exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of his words settling over them. Claire's face hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. Chris continued, his gaze steady. This restaurant was built on respect. Respect for every person who walks through those doors, whether they're a first-time diner or a regular, a CEO or a dishwasher. When we fail to uphold that respect, we fail as a team. Angela watched as some staff members nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably. Tonight, Chris said, his eyes landing on Claire, a customer was treated in a way that was unacceptable. She was ignored, disrespected, and spoken to in a manner that has no place here or anywhere else. Claire's cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth to speak, but Chris held up a hand. Not yet. You'll have your chance. Turning back to the group, Chris's voice grew stronger. This isn't just about one mistake. Mistakes happen. We've all made them. But how you handle those mistakes matters. Taking responsibility matters. Treating people with dignity matters. Claire shifted uncomfortably, her arms tightening around herself. Chris paused, his tone turning sharper. What happened tonight wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice to treat someone differently based on assumptions, biases, and attitudes that have no place here. Claire stepped forward slightly, her voice defensive. I didn't mean for it to come out that way. I was stressed. It's not about what you meant, Chris interrupted, his tone firm. It's about what you did. Your words and actions hurt someone. That's not stress. That's discrimination. The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy. Angela, who had remained quiet until now, stood. Her voice was calm but carried authority. An apology means nothing without accountability, she said, her gaze fixed on Claire. You didn't just make a mistake. You went out of your way to make me feel unwelcome, and if you can't admit that, then your apology is hollow. Claire looked away, her defenses crumbling under the weight of the stares around her. I didn't mean it like that, she muttered. Then what did you mean? Angela pressed. Because your action said I didn't matter? Is that what you believe? Claire shook her head quickly. No, I didn't mean that. I didn't think it was a big deal. But it was a big deal, Chris said firmly. Not just to my mother, but to every person who comes through those doors expecting to be treated with dignity. That's why you can't stay here. Claire's face crumpled, desperation creeping into her voice. You're firing me over this? Chris's tone softened, but his resolve didn't waver. I'm letting you go because this isn't the first time your attitude has been a problem. Tonight was the last straw. I can't have someone on my team who doesn't respect the people we serve or the values we stand for. Claire's gaze darted around the room, searching for support, but the silence from her coworkers was deafening. She looked back at Chris, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for it to go this far. And yet it did, Chris replied simply. Now it's time to move forward. With slumped shoulders, Claire turned and walked toward the door. The room remained silent until the sound of the door closing echoed through the space. Chris turned back to his staff, his expression resolute. Let this be a reminder of who we are and what we stand for. Respect, integrity, and accountability. If we can't uphold those values, we don't deserve to call ourselves a team. Angela watched as the staff slowly nodded, a sense of unity settling over the group, a quiet victory. Later, as the restaurant emptied, Chris returned to Angela's table, his expression a mix of exhaustion and determination. How's the food? He asked, a small, tired smile tugging at his lips. Angela set her fork down, her eyes warm. Delicious, she said. But more importantly, how are you? Chris sighed, leaning back in his chair, drained. That wasn't easy. Firing someone never is, even when it's the right thing to do. Angela nodded knowingly. It's never supposed to be easy. If it were, you wouldn't be doing it right. Chris chuckled faintly, running a hand through his hair. I just hope the team understands why I had to do it. They do, Angela said firmly. I saw it in their faces tonight. They needed to hear what you said about respect and accountability. This wasn't just about Claire. It was about setting a standard. Chris nodded slowly, his resolve solidifying. You're right, and this is just the beginning. Angela smiled, pride evident in her eyes. It's a strong beginning. A moment of reflection. Chris leaned back in his chair, the weight of the evening settling over him. I can't help but wonder how the customers who saw everything tonight are feeling, he admitted, his brow furrowed. Angela set her glass of water down, her smile warm but knowing. The customers who matter will recognize it for what it was, a moment of accountability. You didn't sweep it under the rug, and that speaks volumes about your character and the values of this restaurant. For a moment, they sat in a companionable silence. The tension from earlier seemed to lift. Replaced by the soothing quiet of the nearly empty dining room, Angela picked up her fork, cutting into the perfectly cooked salmon. You know, she said with a faint smile, despite all that drama, this might be the best meal I've had in years. Chris laughed, the sound more relaxed than before. It better be. I personally told the chef to make it perfect. Angela chuckled, then her expression grew serious. You've built something truly special here, Chris. This restaurant isn't just a place to eat, it's a reflection of who you are tonight. You proved that it's not just about the food, it's about the people. Chris nodded thoughtfully, his gaze drifting to the dining room. You're right. That's exactly why I opened this place, to create something meaningful. Angela set her fork down, leaning forward. But tonight is also a reminder that this fight isn't over. Emily was just one person, but the attitudes she represents, they're everywhere. The only way to combat them is by staying vigilant. Chris's expression hardened with resolve. I know this isn't just about protecting the restaurant's reputation. It's about protecting the people who come here. I need to make sure this place remains a safe and welcoming space for everyone. Angela smiled softly. Exactly. And it's not just about calling out bad behavior. It's about encouraging the good. The way you handled tonight set a precedent, not just for your staff, but for every customer who walked through those doors. Chris tilted his head, his expression pensive. I just hope Emily takes something from it. I know she's gone, but I want her to understand why what she did was wrong. Angela's gaze softened, her voice calm but firm. You can't control whether she learns, Chris. That's on her, but you've done your part. You held her accountable and gave her the truth. The rest is up to her. Chris nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. You're right. From here on out, I'll make sure this place stays true to the vision we've built. Angela raised her glass, her eyes gleaming with pride. To staying true to the vision. Chris lifted his own glass, clinking it against hers. To the vision. The soft sound of their toast echoed lightly through the room, a hopeful note against the backdrop of the quiet restaurant. It had been a long and challenging evening, but it marked a turning point, a testament to the power of standing up for what was right. A surprise return. A month later, the restaurant was alive with its usual hum of activity. Business had flourished in the wake of that unforgettable evening, strengthened by the clear standards Chris had set for his staff. Angela sat at her usual table, sipping tea and basking in the warm, welcoming atmosphere. As Chris made his rounds, his eyes caught sight of a familiar figure standing near the entrance. His stomach tightened as recognition dawned. It was Emily. She clutched a small handbag, her posture stiff and uncertain. Gone was the defensive smirk. Her face was pale, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Chris approached, his expression unreadable. "Emily," he said, his tone calm but firm. "What are you doing here?" Emily straightened, attempting to gather herself. I came to talk if you have a minute." Chris studied her for a moment before nodding. "Let's step outside." He led her to the small patio near the side entrance, away from the bustling dining room. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of flowers from nearby planters. Emily hesitated, wringing her hands. "Look," she began, her voice shaky. "I know I messed up. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Chris's gaze remained steady, his expression giving nothing away. "You said that the night I fired you?" Emily flinched but pressed on. "I mean it this time. I've been out of work since then, and it's been hard. I've had a lot of time to think about what I said, what I did. I let my frustrations get the better of me, and I said things I shouldn't have." Angela stepped onto the patio, her presence calm but commanding. Her voice carried an edge of curiosity as she addressed Emily. "If you've been thinking about your actions, then let me ask you something." Emily blinked, startled. Sure." Angela moved closer, her posture poised. "Why would you say and believe the things you did while working for a black man? Did you think Chris wouldn't notice? Or did you think it didn't matter?" Emily's face turned crimson. She looked down, fumbling for words. I didn't think about it like that. It wasn't about him." Angela's gaze sharpened. "Then what was it about me, people who look like me? What made you think it was okay to treat me or anyone like that?" Emily's voice cracked. "I don't know. I guess I was frustrated, and I didn't mean to." Angela's tone remained calm but firm. "Frustration doesn't make you a racist, Emily. It just reveals what's already there." Emily swallowed hard, her hands trembling. "I grew up around people who thought like that. It's not an excuse, but it's how I was raised. I've never really unlearned it." Angela's expression softened slightly, though her voice stayed firm. "Unlearning starts with acknowledgement, but that's just the beginning. You have to choose to do better every single day, and tonight is a good night to start." Emily nodded slowly, her face crumpling. "I'm trying. I swear I'm trying." Angela studied her for a moment before stepping back. "Then keep trying. But not here. You burned this bridge. It's up to you to rebuild it somewhere else." Chris finally spoke, his voice steady. "My mother's right. This isn't about us anymore. It's about you. Whether you take this lesson to heart is entirely up to you." Emily wiped at her eyes, her voice trembling. "I understand. Thank you for even letting me say this." Angela nodded, her voice gentler now. "Good luck, Emily. I hope you figure it out." Moving forward. As Emily disappeared into the night, Chris turned to Angela, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "Thanks for stepping in. You always know how to get to the heart of things." Angela smiled faintly. "Sometimes people need to hear the truth. Whether they listen is on them." Chris nodded, his resolve renewed. "I just hope she does." Angela placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "And if she doesn't, at least she knows someone held her accountable. That alone is a step forward." Chris looked at his mother, pride and gratitude mingling in his gaze. "You're right, as always." Angela chuckled softly, her voice warm. "You're learning, Chris. That's all that matters." The night had been a long one, but as they returned to the comforting hum of the restaurant, they knew they were moving forward, one step at a time,